Welcome to another post-draft segment of Meet the Future presented by Kubota. I'm Scott Van Cuna, and we're talking with Sportsnet draft guru Sam Cosentino. Sam, yesterday we talked about the strength of the CHL across the board. Today I want to take a look at what you might consider some of the notable selections, and maybe we'll start out east in the queue.
Yeah, so Jeremy Poirier was a guy that many people had projected to go in the first round. He ended up going in the third round to Calgary, and he's a really fascinating player for me. Here's a guy who had 20 goals last year, off to a really good start with St. John in limited games this year so far, but a guy who's got crazy offensive instincts. His hands are amazing, and the deception in his game is awesome. Skating is good, shoots the puck a ton, has really good creativity to his game. And those type of descriptors are normally reserved for what you'd see from forwards. In this case, they're being used for Poirier. Unfortunately, sometimes when we talk about forwards that have all those gifts, the one thing that they do talk about as a deficiency is the defensive side. And that can be said about Poirier as well. So I do feel pretty confidently that Greg Gilbert, now the head coach in St. John, will make him extremely accountable on his own side of the rink, and that should lead to more opportunities with the puck. So he's one guy that probably has first round type of talent, but because of some of the indifference he's shown in his play away from the puck and on the defensive side of the puck, slipped to the third round. William Dufour is another guy. He went to the fifth round in the Islanders. Here's a guy who's bounced around a little bit, traded off of two contending teams in the Quebec League, moving from Rouen-Noranda to Chicoutimi, and then from Chicoutimi to Drummondville. This guy's a former first-round pick in the Q, so there's no question he has the talent. He's a big guy who skates well and really started to assert himself when he went to Drummondville. He had sat down with Denny Gauthier there, the former NHLer, and Steve Hartley, the head coach there, and they gave him some time to kind of assimilate to what Drummondville does in terms of systems and their style of play. And after a while, they sat him down and said, "This is what we need you to be. This is how we expect you to work. This is how you're going to be held accountable here in Drummondville to play to that standard." And it's worked so far. And I think that power forward type player, a big guy who skates well, who has the ability to score goals, is always something that's coveted for the Islanders. They were able to get him in the fifth round.
He's a pretty intimidating force when he's barreling down the ice at you on the wing.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, and he shoots the puck really, really well. They're talking about a guy here that really has some of the, the hallmarks of what a good power forward in the NHL has. And I think to acquire those assets later in the draft is definitely, a good thing for the Islanders.
Who would be your guys in the O?
Yeah, a couple of guys that I want to talk about in the Ontario Hockey League. Brandon Coe is the first guy that comes to mind, playing up in North Bay, and I think it's been very well documented about the tragic loss of his dad. He's an only child, so that probably increases the gravity of the situation. He was open and honest with his writing and talking about that in the Players Tribune, which I thought was a real beautiful piece. In terms of the straight skill set, and even going back to his minor midget days, this is a guy who was very highly thought of. And then he goes to North Bay, where maybe the media attention isn't great, and people are looking at him and saying, well, maybe he's almost, Mario Lemieux-like, where you watch him and you're saying, is he really working? Is he conserving his energy? What type of player is he? And I think it really weighs on your mind, A, when you're playing for a team that loses a lot of games, and B, when you're talking about the constant, worry about your father. So I think in the situation for Brandon, there's a lot more left. I think he's going to be motivated to play for his dad, which I think is an amazing thing and a real positive for him that he can take moving forward. But a guy who's got good size, really good skater, shoots the puck well, point production is really good. So he's a guy there that I think San Jose did a really good job with getting him in the fourth round. The next guy would be, I'm going to go up to Sudbury and talk about Isaac Phillips a little bit. He's a guy that I've been pretty vocal about over the last few weeks and in the last month. 6'3", 210-pound guy. Really athletic guy who moves extremely well. Like his pivoting and his lateral movement, I think, is fantastic. And I think he's a guy who's just starting to learn that he's actually a bigger guy and that he can start to apply himself and lean on the opposition a little bit, but a guy who again produces pretty good offense for a team that was really good, that did have some other options offensively up front, and then of course with Jack Thompson and his teammate there on the back end. So Isaac Phillips is a really interesting guy to me, picked by Chicago in the 5th round.
It seemed like the coaching change in North Bay helped Co out a little bit. And as for Phillips, it's, another organization, Sudbury, that's on the rise with Byfield and Jack Thompson joining him and getting drafted there.
Yeah, and I think, Rob Papineau, the general manager there, has done an awesome job. We're going to see another high pick there in Chase Stillman, the son of head coach Corey, in the 2021 draft. So it's kind of what we talked a little bit about yesterday, where you have that cyclical movement. You attract good players, and good players attract other good players. And I think that ball's really rolling well for Rob Papineau and the Sudbury Wolves.
All right, now let's head out west. And who are your guys out in the WHL?
Yeah, really interesting there. Dylan Garand is a guy that I absolutely love. He's a 4th round pick. I think he's a Rangers pick, goaltender with the Kamloops Blazers, thrust into action late in the year 2 years ago when Dylan Ferguson went down and was really charged with trying to get his team into the playoffs. He did so by way of a tiebreaker game against their hated rival Kelowna, and then went into last year with all of that confidence and really had an outstanding year. But a guy who's super serious. He's committed to making himself better. I wouldn't say he's on the smaller side in terms of NHL standards, but in terms of his work ethic, how serious he is, the pro mentality that he takes in terms of fueling his body and what he does off ice in order to prepare. Really, really impressive stuff there from Dylan Garand. The other guy who we got to see was the former 1st overall import pick, and that's Kasper Puutio, who was traded last year from Swift Current, where they've had a lot of success with Finnish players there in the past. Didn't quite work out this time, but traded over to Everett and got into a system in Everett where he really started to blossom and show that he had an offensive side to his game. I talked to the coach, Dennis Williams, a little bit about Puutio, and they've been really impressed with some of the bite that he brings. And that's maybe an unexpected element to his game that Everett didn't think they were getting in the package with Puutio. So when you look down the stretch, his last dozen games, it was close to a point per game. So now you're all of the elements of that overall defense and really coming into play there with Puutio, selected by Florida there in the 5th round.
Well, we always look back at drafts and we think, how did everyone miss on this guy, or why did this guy slip so far? Braden Point comes to mind, especially with his playoff success. I know it's really early, but out of those 6 guys you mentioned, who do you see as having the greatest steal potential?
Well, I think Ko is probably that guy for me, because a lot of times when you look at a player's history, when you go back to how early they were drafted into their respective leagues, whether it's in the Western League in the Bound draft or at the minor midget age, coming out of Ontario or Quebec, you tend to see that carries forward through their CHL career, and then oftentimes either in the American Hockey League or to the NHL. So Ko has been pegged as being one of those guys for a long time. And I think with the stuff that we had talked about, obviously weighing heavily on his mind, I think there's an opportunity for this guy to have a big time, breakout year. So he'd be my guy of that group of 6 that I would say probably has the leg up on everybody else.
Well, you heard it here first. Brandon Ko is going to be the steal of this draft. Thanks for this, Sam, and we'll get in touch again tomorrow.
Sounds good, Scott.